And it is time for today's pre-show of our N10-008 Network Plus study group. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're getting the last few things, getting things together here, making sure, are we recording? We are. You can kind of see my Cylons there. I need to bring the camera down a little bit, don't I? So we can see our Cylons are there. We're good there. I've got cameras look good. Stream looks okay. Numbers are very good right now. So we're in pretty good shape. AT&T still not available on my network, so we're working on it. I'm glad that's not my backup, or I'm glad that's not my primary for that matter right now. I've always thought of getting like a AT&T 5G wireless backup, and I just haven't done that yet. Now I'm thinking, is that really a great idea? Maybe I should get something else. There's advantages and disadvantages to everything, of course. So, okay. Today is the N10-008. Let's see, we can pause that. We've got questions that come from the 008 exam objectives. I should probably put up our push pin, right? Let's do that. Let's open the poll. There we go. Where are we joining from? We can show the results. Now you could also, there's the link. If you would like to put your pin in the map, you're welcome to do that. I need to make it a little bit dimmer. Oh, things are looking pretty good here. We're in pretty good shape. We've already done 2 live streams this week. We did one on Monday. We did one on Tuesday. I took Wednesday off. We have today as our Network Plus study group. And then tomorrow is Security Plus, which Loco Boys Gaming does not need, because in the chat they put, just took him past 2 hours ago, my SY0701 Security Plus. Congratulations on your new certification. We've also got Anthony in the chat room who also passed my Security Plus thanks to you. Well, I didn't take the exam, kind sir. You're the one that did all the hard work there. You did all the heavy lifting. So that's what that's about. Congratulations to you as well, Anthony. This is great. I love hearing the stories of we got our cert. We got the paper. It's in our pocket. Now you can go do fun things with it, which I think is great. Okay, so we are going to keep this thing going. Thanks for joining us in the chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's always so much more fun. We can get folks that are here live. We're doing stuff at the same time. We're going through all the questions. We're trying to figure it out. And then, of course, I have questions that I will answer in the after show. That is the hour after this one. And if you want to submit a question for the after show, there is a tab in your Vevox app. You can find that front end by going to professormesser.com/QA. I guess it isn't a Vevox app any longer, is it? It's just the web page. I think they transitioned away from the app for whatever reason. I haven't tried it. Let's try it with the app and let's see what happens. We'll just try the QR code that's right there and see if that indeed still continues to take us over to the Vevox website. Where am I joining from? Yes. So it just brings that up. It no longer brings up the details of that. If you like, the answering page is on your screen. There it is, professormesser.com/QA. QA. I forget what the QA stands for, but it stands for something. I don't think it's spelled right. Usually there's a U in there, isn't there? QA is the URL, and that will take you to the question and answer so that you can follow along with what we're doing. In fact, maybe it is question and answer. Oh, we cracked the code. We figured it out. You can see my YouTube is up. We're doing YouTube live on this one. I see the chat going by. We've got plenty here to go through. Now we've got top of the hours when we start. Currently it's 11:54 and almost a half. And we will be starting at the top of the hour. This is not the live stream. This is not the event. This is not the study group. This is just the back of my head that you get to see from the bird cam. Hey, bird cam. How you guys doing? So that's what that is. And we'll get these things started. I do get emails from time to time, people wondering, when are we going to actually see you on this? Like it does happen, but you have to wait until the pre-show's over. I like to go live about 10 minutes early just so I can make sure things are working okay. And it tends to be a good check. I think what it really does is get me ready to go 10 minutes early. And then the rest of it is just sort of is time to kill. Whereas if I didn't do that, I would probably be scrambling until the last second and then finally going live. And then everybody has to connect and we don't get to have these lovely conversations if I do that. So that's what that's about. Okay, we're going to go through and get all these things done. I have all new questions for you from the Network Plus exam today, so that'll be fun. I've got all new questions tomorrow for Security Plus. So there's plenty to go through here in the last part of the week. It's really unique. I don't think I've ever crammed in all 4 live streams in a month, crammed them all into a single week. It was not by design. That's not how I wanted to do it, but that is how it ended up working out this month. So, but that's okay. It all worked out. We finally got everything in its place, which is sort of the fun part. And now we just need to do the live stream. Now we just need to get things going. So shouldn't be but another 3 minutes, 3 3/4 minutes anyway, and we'll be up and running with the live stream. Hopefully you've been able to connect and log in to. Well, I see a number of you are putting in the information on the screen of where you happen to be, so you can see where people are putting their push pins in around the world. It's folks in Africa. We've got some folks in India, some folks in Europe. Most of us are in the US or Canada, but it doesn't matter. You can be anywhere in the world. It's that fantastic internet thing the kids are all talking about. So that works out perfect. Okay, let's get some cameras ready to go here for the other piece of it. All right, 3 minutes. 3 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. We'll get things going. The next thing we're doing this today. We've got the hour of Q&A that I'll be giving you, and then the after show hour today. And then tomorrow is the same thing, but it's Security Plus. It's, to be more specific, it's not Security Plus, it's the SY0701 Security Plus. So that's what that's about. There's the inevitable question. Any plans for the Network Plus practice exam? Not only are there plans, we're doing some work along those lines. So we do plan on having Network Plus practice exams in 2024, this year, this calendar year. I would love to have some. They will. It's one of those things, though. You have to write them, and that's the hook. That's the problem area. Is there has to be time and effort, like anything else. So as soon as we get to that point, there's a lot going on with Network Plus this year. So we gotta get all of our ducks into their proverbial rows before we really get going on all of this. I guess ducks really go in a row anyway. It's not very difficult, is it? That's an unusual proverb, that get our ducks in a row. Well, the ducks they're just in a row naturally, aren't they? Every time I see a ducks following their mother, they're in a row. It's not like you had to do anything special. So I don't know. Maybe I don't understand the nuances. Clearly, I do not understand the nuances. All right. We've got a minute or so to go, a little over, and we will get things going here. Yes, it's always something interesting here. We've got the studio is just evolving under my feet. There's so many things I want to change and update with what we have here. I have a temporary, you can't hear it, but I have a temporary amp set up for my headphone, my temporary headphone amp, and it is not a balanced amp, and it's nothing but hiss in my ear. But I need to hear myself so that I hear what you hear, and at some point I may just rip that out because it just doesn't sound good in my ear. Although I can hear myself, which I guess is the important part. You can't hear the hiss, but I absolutely can. So that's what that's about. All right, it's almost time. It's almost the top of the hour. Is it about the adult ducks? It's about getting your adult ducks in a row? Okay. We'll go with that then. Sure, why not? Why wouldn't it be? Of course. It's about the adult ducks. I think that would have been my clue. That would have been how we would have broken this one down. Well, with that, let's see if we can get everything connected here. It's the top of the hour. Let's get our keynote underway. I'm looking for a green light here. Did I get the green light? I sure did. There it is. It's connected. There's my slides. There's the thing I need to do. That all looks very good. It's time for live stream, everybody. Let's get some graphics up and get things started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 2024 Professor Messer N10-008 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and we get to see just how well you know those exam objectives. If you are here live, you can join us and interactively answer these questions by visiting the URL that is on your screen. You simply need to go to professormesser.com/QA, and you will see that there will be a question waiting for you when you get to that page. This link, by the way, is the same link that we will use for the duration of the study group. So once you're on that page, you don't have to move. You're in exactly the right place to make all of this work. Now, the thing that we normally do with this is we will create some Q&A, some questions and answers. I have one that is from last month so that we can try to see if our QA link is working properly. And the standing rule that we have for all of these questions is please do not answer the questions in the chat room. Please do not answer the questions or have hints about the questions in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that's on your screen to answer the question, which is professormesser.com/QA. This question asks, a user's traffic has been blocked by the corporate DLP appliance. Which part or which of the following would most likely be part of this traffic? Would it be SQL injection, device certificate, buffer overflow, PII, or routing protocol update? Now, if you think you know the answer, again, follow the link that's down here, professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock in your answer. You don't need any IDs. You don't need any special QR codes. You simply visit that URL and it will take care of everything from there. The interesting part about this process of the Q&A is that we'll put our votes in for this, and then we'll come back to this question in just a bit. I want to let everybody know that we do one of these study groups every month. We also have an archive of these study groups available on our YouTube channel. You can always visit and subscribe to that channel by going to professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have weekly pop quiz questions for Network Plus. You'll find those on our service formerly known as Twitter by visiting professormesser.com/Twitter. We also are on Instagram with professormesser.com/Instagram. The Network Plus exam itself is one that was released in September of 2021. That means the estimated retirement of this is around March of 2025, although I'm getting some feel from CompTIA that we may be moving some of those dates around just a little bit. So keep checking in to the CompTIA website. They will always be the primary and official dates are always listed on that website. This is a single exam that you have to pass. This exam is 90 minutes long, and you could get a maximum of 90 questions on the exam. The score that you're hoping to have at the end of the exam is a score of 720, and it is graded on a scale between 100 and 900. The exam itself consists of primarily multiple choice questions, very similar to the style we just saw. But you will also find performance-based questions on the exam, and we'll talk about performance-based questions in just a bit. I'll also let you know that we have downloadable versions of our videos, we have course notes, and so much more that you can get in our Success Bundle. Find out more about that on our website. Visit professormesser.com/netsuccess. We also have all of these books and materials in a physical format, not just the digital one. So hopefully you'll find something that works for your studies. Also let you know that this live stream is available to watch immediately afterwards on the replay. It happens automatically on the YouTube side. I also post a audio-only podcast version of this study group. You can find that by visiting professormesser.com/podcast. And then you can add it to your favorite podcast listening program. We're also probably on one of your favorite streaming sites. So if you go to Spotify, for example, and search for Professor Messer. You will also find all of the podcasts there as well. There is, of course, our YouTube channel that you could find the archive of all of these. And thanks to my marketing manager, Lori, she goes through this list and she puts timestamps in for all of this. She's watching the replay. Hi, Lori. She's going through and making sure that all of these timestamps are available so you can go back years of these videos and find exactly what you're looking for at exactly the right time in the video. That might save you a little bit of room. We've also got our chat when I'm not here doing a live stream on YouTube. I'm almost always in our Discord, and it'd be great if you were there too. You can join us by visiting professormesser.com/Discord. That will get you there. So hopefully these are just some of the things that can get you towards the process of taking your exam, because eventually you will need to take this exam. You could go to the CompTIA website and pay full price to take the exam. Or if you happen to be in the US or Canada, you can go to professormesser.com/vouchers. And I have discounted vouchers already on my site. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need a special extension in your browser. You simply visit professormesser.com/vouchers. We have vouchers there for all of the CompTIA exams. And if you purchase a voucher on my site, you get a bonus that you don't get anywhere else, which is a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook I wrote that took all of the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years and put them into one single document. Maybe it's something that can help with your studies. It might also get you a couple of extra points during the exam itself. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question we looked at earlier. The question asks, a user's traffic has been blocked by the corporate DLP appliance. Which of the following would most likely be part of this traffic? Would it be SQL injection, device certificate, buffer overflow, PII, or routing protocol update? It's got to be one of those, right? So this is where we can lock in our answer. Let's see what you chose as the answer. Maybe it's something you remember from last month. 48% of you say the answer is PII. 24% of you say it is a device certificate. And then 12% say it's a routing protocol update. And then we have effectively a tie for last place between SQL injection and buffer overflow. Well, it would certainly help to answer this question if we knew what a DLP appliance actually was. And that is really the key to this particular question. If you know that DLP stands for data loss prevention, that might give you some idea as to what's going on. Although just knowing data loss prevention, isn't everything data loss prevention? This doesn't tell us exactly what this is. So this particular device is designed to look for personal information or private or sensitive information and prevent it from being transferred over the network. So things like a social security number, credit card number, something relating to medical records or anything personal, we want to be able to block that if it's being sent over our network. Or maybe we would like to make some rules that say if you are sending that information, it has to be over an encrypted channel rather than being sent in the clear. You can do all of that with data loss prevention. And DLP is a fantastic tool for blocking some of these data streams that you might be concerned about. Sometimes this will be an appliance that you put on the network. Sometimes this is software that you can run on a server, but it is a very valuable way to monitor for certain types of traffic and block it before it gets out of your local network. That means if we look at the answers that are here, the one that most of you chose, 48% of you chose PII. Of course, that stands for personally identifiable information. Those are pieces of information that are specific to you: your name, your phone number, your address, your social security number, credit card numbers, or anything else that may be sensitive. So in this case, that is exactly the answer we were looking for: a DLP appliance. That data loss prevention that it is preventing is data that may be associated with something personal. The PII describes that exactly. A device certificate we would normally put on a device to be able to identify it as something that we can trust. Normally, when an organization is deploying a new set of laptops or mobile devices, they will put their own digitally signed device certificate on that device. And then if that device tries to log in, we can query that device and say, oh, you're trying to log in? Let me see your device certificate to see if you're really running on a trusted machine. That machine will then show you the device certificate. Oh, I see that I digitally signed this. That means that I must trust that device and you're welcome to come into the network. So in this particular case, a DLP is not going to stop a device certificate. That is not what is part of this traffic. And it certainly is something that you would like to have transferred through the network. So that would not be the answer we were looking for. SQL injection and buffer overflow are attack types. The DLP appliance is not designed to look for those attack types. You probably would want something like an intrusion prevention device, an IPS, to be able to stop a SQL injection or a buffer overflow, especially if it is a known vulnerability, a known exploit. And then lastly, a routing protocol update. That's something that happens normally within routers. You don't want your DLP appliance to get rid of those. So a routing protocol update would not be the right answer. The one we were looking for was the one that 48% of you chose, PII. You got that one absolutely correct. Well done. That is the question, what we call our rewind question of the month. Hopefully that's given you some ideas of things to think about. And now we need to find our next rewind question for next month, which will be somewhere in this next set of questions. So let's jump ahead now to that next set of questions. I have more there. We have a lot to go through in this list. One of the things that you'll notice on your exam, though, is when you first start the exam, the first questions you get will not be multiple choice. So, for example, we just did a multiple choice question. There it is. It has a question, and then there are multiple choices to select from. That's a very standard type of test question that you might get. But the first handful of questions you get on your exam will not be multiple choice. Instead, CompTIA gives you what they call a performance-based question. You'll sometimes see this abbreviated as a PBQ, a performance-based question. This performance-based question is simply any type of question they would like to ask, but it's in a different format than multiple choice. So it might be a matching question, a fill in the blank. They might put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. There are many different things that could be asked. Now, the benefit of this, of course, is that you've already studied the exam objectives, I'm sure. The exam objectives are all the information that might be asked during the exam. So this is really just another way to ask you about something that you probably already know about. So don't be thrown over the format. As long as you know the content, really doesn't matter how they ask the question of you. Well, I have for you today a performance-based question. This one is a visual performance-based question. For those of you listening on the podcast, I'll just apologize now because this one you really do need to see the pictures to be able to answer this question. And these pictures are name these connectors. So I have in front of you 4 different network connectors. Now, this is a very good example of a performance-based question. Notice that in this particular case, I'm making this question a little bit harder than it normally would be on the exam because I'm giving you a fill-in-the-blank question, which for the purposes of A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, I've never seen a fill-in-the-blank question on a performance-based question, other than maybe something at a command line, which we don't tend to see a lot of those anyway. So this question, I'm not giving you any prompts. I'm not giving you any options. If this was an actual exam, these 4 pictures might be there, and they might give you 8 different things to choose from, which means some would be left over at the end. But I thought, no, let's not make it easy. Let's make it more difficult. So that's what we did in this case. I give you these 4 connectors that are on the screen, A, B, C, and D. And what I would like you to do is to tell me what those 4 connectors might be. You can answer the question using that URL at the bottom of the screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We are going to go through this list and see what we can see. Now, you'll notice on this, for those of you in the chat room, a couple of people already mentioned that they're very concerned about these performance-based questions. It's this fear of the unknown. But as you can see, this is not a complex question to maneuver through. It's giving you some pictures and you have to identify the pictures. That's it. That's one of those things that I think can be really useful when you're worrying about the exam and then it turns out, what was I worrying about? This wasn't something difficult or different that I would need to figure out. It's very straightforward. And in fact, that is probably the biggest feedback I get from people who are working on their exam is that they say, well, the performance-based questions were not as bad as I thought they were going to be. And that probably is my number one feedback on performance-based questions. If you know the content, you know the exam objectives, as I mentioned, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question. You're going to do just fine on these. That's the important part. So a number of you are putting in the answers to these right now. I'm seeing a lot of different connections on here, a lot of different answers. It's interesting. Some of you are being very detailed with the type of connectors. Again, we're asking about the connectors. We are not asking about any cables or cabling. So some of you are giving me answers telling me about the type of cable that I would use for these connectors. That wasn't the question. I want to know what the connectors are. See if you know the name of those connectors. All of these, I don't think you've seen any of these images. Maybe you've seen one of them before. I try to get images maybe you haven't seen because you should be able to walk into a data center, look at the back of a router, and know what all of those different connectors happen to be. And if you don't know what they are, it might be a good idea to start studying up on those. There's always something new to find in a data center, just as there's usually something very old to find in a data center as well. So let's see how you did with this performance-based question. A number of you have put in your answers for this one. Let's see how many responses we've got. So let's step through each one of these one at a time and see how you did with naming these different connector types. Let's start at the very beginning. It's this connector here. A lot of you said that's a coax connector. Well, it is a coax cable. That is true. And it is a connector at the end of a coax cable. So in this particular case, we want to know what are these little connectors at the end? What do we call those? And the name of those connectors is an F connector. You may be wondering, what does that F stand for? It doesn't stand for anything. It is a connector type that was created along with the A connector, the B connector, the C connector, the D connector, and the E connector, and many more. I'm not making that up. It just happened to be that this is the connector that's stuck. This is the one that everybody decided we're not going to use the A connector. We're not going to use the B connector. We eventually ended up using a type of C connector, didn't we? USB-C, but that's not what was going on back then. We ended up using the F connector. So the F connector is what that's called because it just happened to be that character, that letter is the one that happened to be in the line when we were creating these. Just one of those interesting examples. And it does indeed commonly connect a coax cable, and most of the time you'll see these on television and cable modem type connections. So this next on our list, we have a picture in the middle that looks like some type of punch down block, and indeed it is. Hopefully you knew the type of block that it is. This is a Crone block. The Crone block has those larger connections in between. You can see all of those different wires going in. Let's see if we can zoom up a bit so we can really see. You can see how the wires are going in between these, and there are these little connections that cut into the outside insulation so that it's able to touch or connect to the copper that's on the inside. So it becomes a very easy process. You put the wire in the punch down, you use your punch down tool to stick it in there so that it pierces through that insulation, and now it's in the block. It's so easy to have that there. That type of block, though, is not a 110 block. It's not one of those other blocks. It is a Crone block. You have to know 4 different block types on the the Network Plus exam. So it's important to know by visually that is indeed a Crone block. Let's do another one. Next on our list is in the upper right, we have what appears to be something very modular. And indeed it is, because those are small form factor pluggable, SFP, or maybe the enhanced version of the SFP called the SFP Plus. You don't know because they both look identical. The only way you would know if it was an SFP or an SFP Plus is you would need to pull it out of its connector and look at the model, or many times whatever you're connecting it to you'll be able to query it in the configuration of that device, so it will tell you what that is. These are modular connectors. Normally there will be a blank spot in a switch, and that blank spot is used so that you can grab an SFP and plug it into that particular interface on the switch. That's because sometimes you don't know what you're connecting to. Will we be connecting to a copper connection, or will we need to connect to a fiber connection? Well, having that SFP slot means that I can put a copper SFP or a fiber SFP into that slot and be able to use that capability. So we have connectivity to that switch. These are very common to use. Different types of transceivers are very, very common across switches, routers, and other networking devices. And our last connector type, we have that here at the bottom. This connector type does appear to be a fiber optic connection. And it's a very small type of fiber optic connection called a mechanical transfer registered jack, or as we just tend to call it, an MTRJ. This is an MTRJ connection. One of the challenges you have when working with fiber is that you want to have enough real estate on the switches and other devices to be able to connect many, many different types of interfaces. For example, a 19-inch rack is only so wide. How many different connectors can you have in that 19 inches going across? Can I fit 12? Can I fit 24? Can I fit more than that? We want to have smaller connectors so that we can fit more interfaces on those devices. And so the fiber connection here, a relatively small one, is the MTRJ. It's difficult to see. Let's zoom up again. Stand by, please. If you look at the end of the MTRJ connector, you can see that it's got the tiny little fiber connections coming out at the bottom. So that's a relatively small form factor for a fiber connection. And that's exactly where the fiber connects in, the transmit and the receive, so that you can see exactly what that's using. The MTRJ, something very common to see on those fiber connections, especially on the switches and routers that we would be using these days. So there is our performance-based question of the month. That first image is an F connector with the coax. We have a Chrome block as our second connection, an SFP, or it could be an SFP plus in this third connection, and the last connector is a fiber connection for MTRJ. Hopefully you got a number of those correct. If you're not familiar with those, make sure you go check those out in the exam objectives. And of course, this is only a small number of the connectors that are listed in the objectives. Make sure you go look at that list of connectors and cables, because you may be asked to recognize any of these by sight. Now let's shift back to a multiple choice based question. We'll go look at some more of these. So get yourselves ready. This question asks, a company's main facility has been hit with ransomware, and the company moved their production data center to an alternate facility an hour later. Which of the following would describe this recovery location? Would it be link aggregation, VRRP, diverse path, hot site, or MTTR? Have a number of different options to choose from. All of these are in the exam objectives, but only one would describe this recovery location. Company's main facility has been hit with ransomware, and the company moved their production data center to an alternate facility an hour later. Which of the following would describe this recovery location? Is it link aggregation, VRRP, diverse site, diverse path, hot site, or MTTR? If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this one might be. Maybe you were trying to connect to your AT&T network today and you weren't able to do it. So you moved to an alternate facility where you found that it didn't work there either. Maybe that wasn't the question we were shooting for. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Let's do a quick check for the AT&T folks. Still no 5G on my AT&T network. They're still working on it. They are they're slowly bringing things back. I see lots of speculation today on that. For those of you watching on the replay, it's old news now. That's why I don't tend to do a lot of things that are going on in the news. But whenever you have an entire carrier's network go out, it certainly makes the headlines for something like that to happen. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a company's main facility has been hit with ransomware, and the company moved their production data center to an alternate facility an hour later. Which of the following would describe this recovery location? Is that link aggregation, VRRP, diverse path, hot site, or MTTR? And let's see how you answered this particular question. We can see that 86% of you say the answer is hot site. We have 8% that say it is diverse path, and then a three-way tie for third place between link aggregation, VRRP, and MTTR. So you have a number of different things to choose from. If you are taking an entire data center and you're able to transfer that out to another site in about an hour or less, then you're probably connecting to a hot site. And we call it a hot site because everything there is running as a duplicate of our actual data center. Everything there is up and running. It's creating heat because it is running. It's a hot site. It is one that has all of the routers, all the switches, all of the servers, all of the data. Everything is duplicated. So if you buy something for your main site, you are also buying it for your hot site. This also means, though, that you not only have to keep the hardware up to date, but you have to keep the software up to date, and perhaps even more challenging, the data itself. So it would not be unusual to have some type of method to constantly back up or replicate data between locations. That's very commonly done in hot site configurations, and maybe you've worked with a hot site before and you're already familiar with this. We have other options here that people chose. A diverse path would be a different network connection that would allow you to either automatically or manually switch over if the primary connection has some type of problem. You may be saying to yourself, when are we ever going to have a problem with our carriers? That's not going to be an issue. Well, you may be right. But in this particular case, a diverse path might help you because you might have one path to get to a remote site using one carrier and a different diverse path that may use a different carrier. That way, if you lose a wide area network connection, you can, of course, be able to switch over and have another path to pull from. That wasn't the problem we had here. We didn't have a connectivity problem to this alternate facility, so we didn't have to worry about a diverse path to be able to do that. We have VRRP. Whenever we start to work with routers, we tend to have multiple routers, and to have a redundancy protocol between these virtual routers or virtual routing systems is an important one. A VRRP allows us to have many different routers in place, and if one router happens to fail, we still have a way to get out of that local network because we have more routes. Link aggregation is a way to take multiple connections and bind them all together and use them as one much larger link. That wasn't the problem we had here. We were simply needing to move to this alternate facility. And in the meantime, to repair, well, that's certainly a question that people are going to have because they need to get everything back up and running. But the meantime to repair has nothing to do with the problem we were trying to solve in this question. In this case, it's the one that 86% of you jumped on immediately. It is indeed a hot site. That is the one that best describes what's going on at that other location. Let's do another networking question. I have another one ready for you. I don't know how you could beat 86%, but let's see if you can. This next question on our list asks, a winter storm has disabled the internet connectivity to a remote warehouse location. Which of these would be the best way for the network administrator to update the configuration of a firewall at the remote site? Would it be SSH, remote desktop gateway, split tunnel, out-of-band management, or cloud-hosted virtual desktop? There's your problem. Let's see if you can pick the solution. The question again asks, A winter storm has disabled the internet connectivity to a remote warehouse location. Which of these would be the best way for the network administrator to update the configuration of a firewall at the remote site? Would it be SSH, remote desktop gateway, split tunnel, out-of-band management, or cloud-hosted virtual desktop? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, follow the link on your screen, and there's where you need to lock in what you think the answer is. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll see how well you would troubleshoot and solve this particular issue. I think that's probably one that this issue itself is not unusual. Many of us have been in this situation before, we'll put it that way, having to deal with connectivity and being able to understand our best choices for updating these devices in all sorts of situations. In this case, we've got a disabling of the internet connectivity, which makes me sad. I don't know if I can work. I get a little itchy just thinking about having no internet connectivity. So I realize I have a problem. We'll have to address that on a future live stream, though. We can't deal with that right now. We're trying to solve this problem with updating the firewall at the remote site. What is your answer? If you think you know, lock it in at professormesser.com/QA. See how you do with that. And let's see what you chose. Again, the question asked, a winter storm has disabled the internet connectivity to a remote warehouse location. Which of these would be the best way for a network administrator to update the configuration of a firewall at the remote site? Is that SSH, remote desktop gateway, split tunnel, out-of-band management, or cloud-hosted virtual desktop? And you chose, 56% of you chose out-of-band management. 20% chose SSH. 10% chose remote desktop gateway, and then single digits, 7% say a cloud-hosted virtual desktop, and 5% say a split tunnel is how you would do it. Well, our problem here is we were told we need to update this firewall, except the site has no internet connectivity. And most of the time, we are connecting to these remote sites over an existing internet connection, whether it is in the clear or direct connection, or it may be, in most cases, probably an encrypted tunnel, such as a site-to-site IPsec tunnel. And so if you lose connectivity over the internet, how are you supposed to connect to this site to be able to configure that firewall? Well, we need some type of connectivity that is not in-band. It's not using the existing connection. It's using a different type of connection. We refer to that as an out-of-band connection. Out-of-band connectivity is what you would use if you were not able to connect with the primary connection. And if you have a look at the routers and the switches that you have configured in these locations, you'll notice that all of the switches, all of the routers, all of the firewalls, all of the load balancers, practically anything that you're installing into an infrastructure, especially a significantly large infrastructure like that, you have a interface on that device that says console, COM port, OOB. That's another one you might see for out of band and being able to work through it. All of these are important considerations because there may be times when you can't connect to that device through its primary Ethernet link, and you'll need to use something like a modem or a separate connection. Maybe you have a separate DSL connection or a separate cable modem connection that is created just for these particular scenarios. That's what we were looking for in this case. So connect up a modem. Now you can use just a standard modem connection to be able to at least have connectivity to this site. And here we're using a COM port. This is a serial connection that we would use, this 9-pin, I guess we call it a DB9. Technically, it's a DE9 connection, but that's the type of connection on some older equipment. You might, if you look at a COM port or a console port on an existing switch or router, these days you tend to see a USB-A connection, a USB-C connection, something that is a little more modern. But these devices tend to sit in these data centers for a very, very, very long time. It probably would not be unusual to find a number of devices with these older style DB9 connectors on them. So that's what the out-of-band connection is. It's a way to connect to these devices even if you don't have a direct connection using your normal network links. And in this case, we absolutely had a problem. This remote site was caught in a winter storm. It probably brought down all their communication lines, or at least the ones for the internet, because the internet is the one that failed. That means that you would need to dial around, use the alternate connection, use that separate DSL that you installed, use the cable modem connection that you put in just for this very issue. In fact, when you're building out these remote sites, it's usually part of the planning process. How are we connecting this remote site? Oh, we're connecting it with a business line internet, cable modem internet connection. Great. That sounds great. What are we going to use when that ultimately fails? What is our backup connection? And so that's already in the plans. It's already in the planning process. And somebody will think, well, we can get DSL here. Let's put DSL. Maybe it's nowhere near a DSL connection. Maybe we need to put in some type of non-terrestrial link. So we're using Starlink or some other type of satellite-based non-terrestrial connectivity. Or maybe this site, there is a cable provider in town, and the cable provider is the one that can provide us with that backup connection. And that's what we would use to connect to the out-of-band connection. That's what we were looking for. 56% of you chose that option. Now, why would it not be SSH? Well, how are you going to connect over secure shell if there's no connection? The internet is down. There is no internet connectivity to this site. The normal console that you would bring up and SSH into the device, it's not going to be able to get to that site because the winter storm has disabled that internet connection. So although 20% of you chose SSH, you'll be sitting there for a while watching the cursor blink and never connect to that particular device. A remote desktop gateway has a similar problem. We're trying to connect to that device using remote desktop, or at least using a gateway for remote desktop that we can then jump from there to another device. But if there's no internet connectivity, we're not going to be able to use that either. We also have cloud-hosted virtual desktop. If you've ever seen those, it puts your desktop in the cloud, which is great if the cloud is available. But if your internet connectivity goes down, you're not going to have a virtual cloud connected desktop to be able to connect to. This is not going to work for you. So cloud-hosted virtual desktops are not going to be a good option. And lastly, a split tunnel. Split tunnel changes the way that the routing works for our systems. When you connect over a VPN, it may be that 100% of your traffic goes through that VPN to the other site that's on the other side. Sometimes the configuration will be changed just a bit so that only corporate traffic goes across the VPN and your normal internet traffic uses the connection that it always uses, which makes the connection much more efficient to the corporate network. So that's not the scenario we were looking for here. Instead, we were looking for some way to get to that site even when the internet was down. And the way that you would do that is by using out-of-band management. OOB, 56% of you chose out-of-band management. That was the right answer. Well done. This is a real challenge with Network Plus, is that there are so many different things you have to remember. And already today, we've looked at connector types. We've gone through connections to remote backup sites with our hot sites. We've talked about out-of-band management. There's so much to be able to go through. And of course, if you wanted to go through all 93 videos that are in my Network Plus course and watch every single one of them, all 14 hours of content, you could do that. But I realize not everybody has that kind of time. So one of the things I did was take everything that's in my videos and I put them into a book form. This is my course notes book. The course notes themselves are able to show you, you can see, in fact, we'll look at course notes. I've got them right here. Here's the digital version. I also have this physical version. It's the printed book version. It's identical to the digital version. It's just in a perfect bound color printout that we can ship to you. This is the course notes. Let's go through this just a little bit. It is in the same order as the videos, which, by the way, are in the same order as the exam objectives. So it's relatively easy to cross-reference this versus any other training material that you happen to be using. And of course, all of the important images, all of the charts, all of the text, everything that's in that video it's in these course notes. I've designed this to be everything consolidated down into one single document that you can put on all of your devices. It's a PDF, so it works on your mobile devices. It is a physical device or physical book if you wanted to carry that around. And if you get the physical version, you also get the digital version for free. So a little bonus there. If you'd like to see more about this, you can find it on my website. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes, or simply follow the link at the top of your screen under the Network Plus menu. It might also, if you're on mobile, it will be under your hamburger menu under the Network Plus option. Not only is that something that I hope can help you with your studies, it's also something that really helps us on this side as well and keeps this whole thing going. So thank you so much for your continued support of that. Let's do some more questions. I've got one for you here. This is a question, talk about troubleshooting. We start off here asking, a TDR shows an open circuit at 45 meters into a 100 meter underground cable run. Which of the following would be the best resolution of this issue? Would we replace the current transceivers, manually configure speed and duplex, install another cable, clean the ends of the cable, or modify the VLAN assignments? I have some options there. A TDR shows an open circuit at 45 meters into a 100 meter underground cable run. Which of the following would be the best resolution of this issue? Replace the current transceivers, manually configure speed and duplex, install another cable, clean the ends of the cable, or modify the VLAN assignments. If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. If you think you know the answer, follow that link. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We are going to see if we know what we would use. A lot of these questions on the exam, and I think indeed probably some of the parts of this that are really interesting to a lot of us, is there are always a challenge or a problem that we need to solve, and we have to figure out the answer to the puzzle. And this is certainly one of these, because you have 5 different options here, all of which, depending on the scenario, could be perfectly valid troubleshooting tasks. But that wasn't this particular scenario, and we can't do all 5 of them. So we have to choose which one makes the most sense for what we need to do. Hopefully this is something you can think through and understand what might be the best option when you're trying to decide one of these. This is a pretty straightforward real world type problem. So we'll see what your real world solution might be. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a TDR shows an open circuit at 45 meters into a 100 meter underground cable run. Which of the following would be the best resolution of this issue? Would it be replace the current transceivers, manually configure speed and duplex, install another cable, clean the ends of the cable, or modify the VLAN assignments? What did you choose? Let's find out. We'll stop the poll, and we can see that 64% of you say install another cable. You've just given up. You've just decided that's your option. So that's a big percentage, though, especially when you consider that the next most popular response was 15% of you saying manually configure the speed and duplex, and we'll solve this whole issue. 8% of you say replace the current transceivers, 6% say clean the ends of the cable, and 5% say that you should modify the VLAN assignments. Well, you got options there. Our problem here, though, was an open circuit. Open circuit is a little different than a short circuit. A short circuit is when you have 2 connectors in the cable and they're touching each other. You really don't want that to happen. We refer to that as a short circuit. And that is one of those times where, again, there's not much you can do. It's a physical cable issue. You would need to fix the physical cable. The same thing would apply if it's an open circuit, which was the scenario that we had in this question. An open circuit means it's a break. There's no connectivity between one or more of the wires inside of that cable. So now we have to what do we do? Can we put them back together somehow? Can we maybe splice the cable or reconnect the cable with some type of connectors? Well, I guess you could. But the problem, though, is every time you put in a splice, every time you add a new coupler or connection into the middle of that, you lose signal. And when you're across something like an outdoor connection between two buildings, you don't want to be in a position where you're creating a weak spot that eventually is going to fail anyway. And that's why if you are in the scenario where you have a 100-meter cable, this is a very long cable, and really kind of halfway through the cable, which is probably in the middle of the parking lot because these cables are often buried underground in a conduit. In that conduit underground, halfway between these, underneath underneath all of that asphalt and all of the cars in the parking lot is the break. Well, it's very difficult to get in there to fix that break. So when you run into that type of scenario, the only way to put this back together so that all the wires are touching each other is to run another cable through the conduit. Now, if you were thinking well ahead, and most people do, whenever you ran that first cable through the conduit, you ran about 4 or 5 others too. And then maybe ran some fiber along with it as well. Whenever you start running those types of connections, that it was probably very involved to have and costly to have someone come in and put the conduit between the buildings. And then we wanted some way to pull all those wires through the conduit. We had to spend time and money and labor to get that done, along with the cable itself. In that entire formula of all the money you spent to do this, the least expensive thing, the least expensive part of this project was the cable. So if that's the least expensive, why don't we run a bunch of it? That way, if in the future we plug in our time domain reflectometer, that's what a TDR is, and it is able to determine that we have an open connection in the cable, let's move that to a different cable connection. And now we just use one of those many other connections that we put in there. In this particular case, it didn't mention any other cables, so the option to install another cable is really the best resolution of this issue. Now, why wouldn't it be one of these other options? Let's go with what 15% of you chose, which is manually configure the speed in duplex. As you probably recall from the Network Plus course, you can sometimes have issues with collisions and throughput of data if the speed in duplex on one side of the connection is different than the speed in duplex on the other side of the connection. But in this particular case, we have an open circuit. It really doesn't matter how you configure the speed in duplex. You are never going to be able to somehow bridge the gap between that open circuit by changing a configuration in your router or your switch. So that's not going to help you very much. That's probably not your best resolution of this issue. In an open circuit, changing the speed in duplex isn't going to help anything. 8% of you say replace the current transceivers. If the transceiver happened to be located 45 meters into the cable run, I might tend to agree with you. But the transceivers are usually on the ends of the connections. We saw pictures of the transceivers in our performance-based question at the beginning of the study group. They're just these small connectors that slide into a switch, a router, or any other device. And in this particular scenario, having those transceivers in place is important. If we swap them out, we're still going to have an open circuit 45 meters into the run. We could swap our connectors, our transceivers all day. It's not going to help that open circuit. That would not be the best resolution of this issue. 6% of you say to clean the ends of the cable. Well, cleaning the ends will certainly ensure that we're able to pass traffic through this. I guess if we're assuming that it's fiber, this would be better. A copper connection doesn't need to have the ends of the cable cleaned, so that wouldn't apply for copper, but let's just assume it's fiber. Cleaning the ends of a fiber connection are a standard operating procedure when you're installing fiber. You want to be sure the end of that cable is very clean. You usually use some type of alcohol, and that way we're able to have a perfectly clean connection when we plug it into the device, and that will optimize the throughput of data over that connection. However, cleaning the ends of the cable, don't somehow make the middle of the cable merge together, fix itself, become whole. It's not going to happen. We still have the open circuit, even if we clean the ends of the cable. And modifying the VLAN assignments are a configuration change within a switch. Making a configuration change in the switch, again, doesn't fix the open circuit. We have a fiber connection, a copper connection, or some other type of link, and we have an open circuit. We're not able to get an electrical signal through it. We're not able to get any type of light through the connection. It's open. And in that particular case, we're working with a TDR. We can really kind of assume that this one happens to be copper. If it was a fiber optic connection, it would be an OTDR for the optical time domain reflectometer. So in this case, installing another cable, as painful as that sounds, as time consuming as that sounds, that is the answer that we were looking for. It really is the best resolution to this particular issue. And 64% of you thought it would be the best resolution as well. And you were absolutely right. You were spot on with that particular answer as well. So hopefully hopefully you never have to do this. You never run into that scenario, or you thought ahead and you already have extra cables inside of that run. So we'll have to see how things work out for your career. You have to be ready for anything. This is a really good example of being ready for anything. Let's do some more questions. If there is a series of questions that people always ask me about, it's port numbers. People can't get enough port numbers. So of course I have for you a port number question. This port number question asks, an administrator has captured network traffic using UDP 514. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this network communication? Is that transfer of logs between switches and routers? Is it remote desktop of a Windows server? Is it automatic IP addressing? Is it remote console access? Or is it email transfer between servers? We have 5 things to choose from. The question again asks, an administrator has captured network traffic using UDP 514. That's what the traffic is using. It is traffic that is marked as UDP 514. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this network communication? Is it transfer of logs from switches and routers, remote desktop of a Windows server, automatic IP addressing, remote console access, or email transfer between servers? Let's see if you know the answer. Use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. I can't put it on the top of that. It's on the bottom. See, I can't seem to, it's that one right there. It's the bouncing ball. You follow the bouncing ball, messer.com/QA. That's where you want to answer those questions. Now, all 5 of these are real scenarios. There are 5 different protocols that could possibly be used to be able to do all of these things. We're looking for just one of these. So you have a 20% chance of guessing, I guess. But hopefully you already recognize UDP 514. Maybe it's one that you've already become familiar with and that you know about. This is where you would go to kind of learn more about these, is the UDP 514. This is the real key. If you think you know the answer, please know hints in the chat room. Please know answers in the chat room. You want to go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock it in. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, an administrator has captured network traffic using UDP 514. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this network communication? Is it transfer of logs from switches and routers, remote desktop of a Windows server, automatic IP addressing, remote console access, or email transfer between servers? What did you choose? Let's find out. We'll stop the poll, and we can see that 66% of you say the answer is transfer of logs from switches and routers. And then it immediately goes to single digits after that. 10% of you say automatic IP addressing. 10% of you, or 9% of you, say remote console access. 7% say email transfer between servers. And 6% say remote desktop of a Windows server. So really a 4-way tie for second place, effectively, in this view. The transfer of logs between switches and routers is the one that most of you chose. And if you were familiar with UDP 514, you should have automatically in your mind thought, wait, that's the port number that is commonly used by syslog. Syslog is a protocol, a standard process for getting logs from a device and transferring those logs to, in most cases, some type of reporting system or log consolidation server. We often see these with a SIEM. That's a security information and event manager. So if you've got, there's tons of SIEMs out there that you can purchase. Splunk is a really good and popular example of a SIEM that will consolidate logs from many different devices. The reason we need syslog is that log files are many and varied, and they're on practically all devices. Well, how do you create a standard to transfer information across so many different devices? We have servers, switches, routers, firewalls, load balancers, DLPs, IDSs, IPSs, and anything else, mobile devices, and all of these devices have logs. Every single one of them has a log on it. So in that case, how do you somehow take all of these different devices, all of them do a completely different thing, have a completely different log format, and they are all created by different manufacturers? How in the world would you have be able to get logs off of all of those? Well, the way you're able to do it is all of those devices have agreed to follow the syslog format, the syslog standard. So that way you can have this consolidation tool go out to a switch and say, please give me all your logs in syslog format, and it will send those. In reality, you really just tell the switch, and it will just keep sending the logs to the syslog server. Same thing for routers, same thing for firewalls, for load balancers, and anything else, is that it's a very common and standardized way to transfer logs from those many diverse devices to a consolidated event viewer, manager, log consolidator, or maybe just like to collect all the logs. That's certainly something that people do as well. So in this case, transfer of logs from switches and routers is the one that fits this particular one perfectly. We're using UDP 514, that's syslog. That means we're transferring log files. It fits that description perfectly. That means 66% of you got that one absolutely correct. That's what we were looking for. Remote desktop of a Windows server uses remote desktop protocol. And that remote desktop protocol is definitely not UDP 514. If you're using 3389, you know that you're using remote desktop. Automatic IP addressing is a protocol for APIPA or DHCP, depending on how the automatic addressing is happening. And those do not use UDP 514. We've got remote console access. Normally, remote console access is using Secure Shell. That's TCP/22, for example. And email transfer between servers. There's many different ways to transfer emails. You might use SMTP. You might use IMAP. You might use POP3. None of those use UDP 514. The only option here that makes any sense is the one at the very top, transfer of logs from switches and routers. That is indeed UDP 514. That's what we're looking for. Hopefully you'll work with those. It is a very common standard. And it is, for those in the chat room, Ryan asks, is it common for there to be a dedicated syslog server? You know, the syslog server doesn't necessarily need to be dedicated. However, there's a couple of resource challenges when you're working with log files. First, if you could just imagine gathering log files from all of these many different devices constantly during the day and having all of those logs reside on one device. If you're thinking storage space is an issue, you would be absolutely correct. One of the universal truths when it comes to syslog, SIEMs, and log consolidation is you never have enough storage space, because you want to keep as much storage space as possible, not only for doing reports and generating and understanding the traffic patterns on your network, but you may also need to go back in time to look for events that could have occurred in the past. Whenever we talk about breaches on our network, the people that are inside of our network that participated in this breach, they're usually in the network for about 6 months before anybody even knows they're there. Well, that means we may need to go back and look at log files from 6 months, 9 months, a year ago, but that also means we have to store all of that log information for that period of time. So having that much storage space is a challenge. It also, when you're creating reports, we have to go through all of that data. We have to sift through all of those details. And depending on the report that you're creating, it may require quite a bit of time to create a single report. And because of that, we may be using a lot of CPU cycles. It may need a lot of fast access to the storage drive. There are some resource limitations you can run into. So although you don't have to have a dedicated syslog server, you really want to have a dedicated syslog server. Just one of those universal truths about syslog, I suppose. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's fit in one more question, shall we? I think we can get at least one more into this list. This question, relatively straightforward. It asks, which of the following would be categorized as a link state routing protocol? Is that EIGRP, QoS, RIP, OSPF, or BGP? There's your 5 options. All real routing protocols, of course. This one asks, which of the following would be categorized as a link state routing protocol? Is that EIGRP, QoS, RIP, OSPF, or BGP? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen to lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know which one of these is a link state routing protocol. And again, all of these answers you see here come from the exam objectives. So if you don't recognize an abbreviation, you don't understand maybe what's being asked in a particular question, make sure you make a note, because you can go back to your exam objectives and have a look at exactly what is expected of you for this exam. We'll talk more about the exam objectives in just a bit. A lot of people lock in their answer in on this one. I'm wondering if this one's a gimme, if this one is everybody's on board with this particular question. When I'm writing the questions, I never know, is this question going to be more difficult or less difficult than I want it to be? I don't want it impossible, but I don't want it to be a gimme. Sometimes I get a good balance. Sometimes I don't. It's always a mystery to me. It's always interesting how these turn out. I am just as curious about the answer as you are, maybe even more so. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would be categorized as a link state routing protocol? Is it EIGRP, QoS, RIP, OSPF, or BGP? Let's see what you chose in this list. We'll close the poll. And we can see that 51% of you say the answer is OSPF. 21% say the answer is EIGRP. We have 10% that say QoS, 11% that say RIP, and then we have 6% that say BGP. So I guess we can start with, what is a link state routing protocol? We know that routers, especially routers that are configured with these dynamic routing protocols, send messages to each other often so that they know what routes are available over on that side, what routes are available over here. All these messages are coming in, and it can build a routing table so that it knows what the most efficient path should be for traffic that is passing through the router. The router is effectively a convenience store. You're pulling at the convenience store and asking for directions, or at least we used to. Then you would ask somebody on the street, how do I get to Central Park? How do I get to Main Street? And they will tell you how to get there. Well, that's what happens with a router. The packet comes in, and the router has to make a decision. How do I best get this packet to the next stop on its way in whatever path it's going to? And it's these routing protocols that allow the routers to automatically create a routing table and do that. A link state routing protocol is relatively straightforward. If there is a link available and it's up and running, we can use that link. If the link is down, we can't use that link. That's it. It is the state of the link that determines what route we're going to use. That's a relatively straightforward piece of this. What's interesting is that different link state protocols might also have a little bit more things to choose from. For example, you might have 2 connections out to a site. One of the connections may be running at 100 megabit. The other connection may be a gigabit connection Which one should you be using? You should be using the faster connection. So sometimes the speed of the link is just as important, or perhaps even more so, than the fact that the link might even be up and running or not. So that is also something that can be considered when you're talking about a link state routing protocol. We often see these link state routing protocols used in very large networks. Some of the protocols that you would see running on these large networks are protocols such as Open Shortest Path First, OSPF. OSPF is it is probably one of the most complex routing protocols that you'll run into, but it is also one of the most capable routing protocols that you will run into. And many organizations are running OSPF either on their internal network or in some cases on an external network, or at least between different locations. This is one that you will constantly find, and it is probably one of the most popular link state routing protocols. So if you chose OSPF, the 51% of you will go with the majority again. They got it absolutely right. OSPF is the answer that we were looking for. That is the protocol that is a link state protocol. Now, the other protocols that we have here, except for QoS is not a dynamic routing protocol. QoS simply stands for quality of service. Very often that is a set of processes or protocols dealing with prioritizing certain types of traffic over others. So in the case of QoS, not really a routing protocol. EIGRP is a protocol that is very commonly used on Cisco-related networks, although it is not technically Cisco specific. It does tend to be very centralized or very focused on the Cisco market. So if you're running Cisco devices on an internal network, you're probably running EIGRP on that. RIP is an older protocol, the routing information protocol, would not be configured as link state, however. And we have BGP, which is probably the most popular external facing protocol because it's used for our internet connectivity. BGP, not a link state routing protocol either. The only link state routing protocol here is OSPF, and 51% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, that is an hour of Q&A, but we're not done yet because I'm going to take your questions in the after show, so stick around for that. But I did want to talk about the objectives. CompTIA gives you a list of everything that's on the exam. They just tell you what's going to be there or could potentially be there. So they give you this list of objectives, and if you know everything that's in this document, you're going to pass your exam. It's really, I want to say that's really that easy, but it's really that straightforward. You spend the time to learn the content and you know exactly what's going to be expected of you on the exam itself. This is where you want to be. Hopefully this is something that you have already downloaded. It should be one of the first things you download, and it's absolutely free to get on the CompTIA website. If you go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/objectives, you can download it. There's a link that will take you right over to the CompTIA website, or simply use your favorite search engine. Go to CompTIA Exam Objectives. That's where the exam objectives are. Download that. It's not only a great thing to start with at the beginning of your studies, it makes a great checklist when you're deciding, am I ready to take this exam or am I not ready to take this exam? Well, go through the list and you can check off everything. And if you can check off most of what's in here, you're probably ready to take your exam. I'll also let you know that we do one of these live study groups every month. We do 2 Network Plus study groups, 2 A Plus study groups, a Network Plus study group, and a Security Plus study group. They're all in here. The next Network Plus study group is currently scheduled for March the 20th. We have A Plus study groups on the 12th and 14th. And in March on the 27th, we also have a Security Plus study group. Although if you're looking for a Security Plus study group, we're doing one tomorrow. So this has been a full week of live streams. Hopefully I've not done too many for you to have to deal with at a very short period of time. But we do have a Security Plus study group tomorrow at exactly the same time. So another thing to consider. These times and dates can change. So make sure you always check with the calendar to know what the latest event schedule looks like. Whenever I make a change, I change it on the calendar first thing. If you'd like to find out where that calendar is, go to professormesser.com/calendar. Well, stick around for the after show. I'll be able to take your questions about Network Plus, about certifications, about IT, about the industry, or about anything else. You can ask those questions by visiting professormesser.com/QA. Don't forget about our Network Plus Success Bundle. You can download our videos, our course notes, and have everything available all at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We also have my Exam Hacks ebook that is included on here. If you ever go to professormesser.com/vouchers, we include our Exam Hacks ebook with all of those. So hopefully that's another place you can go to save a little bit of money during your certification. And of course, we have our Discord, our YouTube, our Twitter, our Instagram. If you ever want to find us on social media, you type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site, /Discord. Join our chat, /YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. And if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up before you close that window so that the folks at YouTube know that you liked it and that you want to see more of it. So this is a great place to transition into the after show. Stick around for that. If you want to join us for our next study group, that is tomorrow with our Security Plus study group at 12 Eastern. And we'd love to see you come back for that one as well. Thanks for joining us on the study group today. Stick around for the after show. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. All right. Let's see how we do with all of this. Let's bring up the camera. That would be good. There we go. Hi, everybody. Now it's the after show. Now it's time where you tell me questions. Instead of me asking you the questions all this time, I am going to take questions from you. So let's hide some of the things that are here. Let me get rid of that. Whoop. These results. So as you can see on your screens, if you are at professormesser.com/QA, you could submit questions at any time. You could submit questions in the first hour if you want to, but you can always submit your questions. They go into a queue, so you won't see them pop up on your screen immediately. I will go through the list of questions as we go, and we'll just answer them one at a time. But it makes it very easy. There's a tab at the top of your screen where you can easily submit questions that you would like to cover during this live stream. A number of you have already put some of the questions in there, so we know absolutely there are some things that we can sift through, that we can actually move through and be able to see all of these. Let's see what else we've got here. Some other pieces of this are things to look at. In fact, this is probably a good place to start when we work through this. We had a question very early on in the study group. In fact, let me bring up the image of this so that we can sift through the answers that you gave. So you probably recall the performance-based question that we did earlier in the study group. And the answers to that question talked about different punchdown blocks. You see the crone block is there, for example. And of course, whenever you're dealing with punchdown blocks, there's many different types depending on where you happen to be in the world and what type of connections that you're going to have. It really just depends. And that's why on the exam objectives, there are a number of different connection types that you might want to consider. I want to bring up the presentation that has these in there. It is under cable management in section 1.3 so that you can get a feel what some of these different blocks might look like. We're gonna have a look at these. Maybe in fact I can bring up the different ones. We're just going to slide through these really, really quickly so you can get a feel for what they are. A lot of different block types. If you're someone who has worked in a data center or with equipment like this before, then you're probably already familiar with some of these. You've probably even seen things like the 66 blocks. Here's a good example of a 66 block. It's been around for a very long time. And if you've got just standard voice connections, You got a lot of old style telephones. I say old style, it's just analog telephones that you have in your facility. And you probably have a 66 block on the back wall of your data center where all of those phones, or at least what used to be all of those phones, would plug into. Looks a lot like this. It's very simple, and it's not really designed for high-speed networking, certainly not gigabit networking, for example, but it's perfect for analog voice communication. If you're doing something with more higher speed Ethernet, then you're probably going to want to use a 110 block. It is one that looks a little bit different. You can see it's much tighter together, these different connections, and it's designed for these higher speeds. So if you're running category 5 or category 6 cables, you can run something like a 110 block where everything is kind of fitting right in here. You can even see, if you look closely, where it's cutting right into the insulation and making the connection whenever you put those into the block itself. We also looked at a Chrome block. Let's keep going here. There's the Chrome block. You commonly see these in Europe. So if you're someone in the US or Canada, you may not see these very commonly. I've seen them from place to place. Occasionally I will run into them, but not very common in the US at all. But they are something you might see if you're in Europe and you're looking for something that's very much like a 110 block. You'll probably see the Chrome block there as well. Here's another shot of what the Chrome block looks like. And then the last block you need to know for the exam is BICS. BICS is a building industry cross connect. Northern Telecom is the one that came up with that one. They even have higher speeds on this. They just kept improving it and improving it and improving it. They have a standard called gigabits, where you can get better than category 6 type coverage through a gigabits cross connect. So there you go. Those are the different connector types. At least that gives you an idea of some of the things you might look at for our connectors. You do have to know all of those to be able to pass your exam. It's all on the exams. All 4 of those different punchdown blocks are in there. So it's important that you know what those are and what those differences are. They're just different types. This is one of the things you see very often in networking is when a new technology hits the market, a lot of people jump in with what their solution to the problem happens to be. Sometimes those solutions are non-standardized, and there's a fight to figure out which one are we going to end up using. This happens all the time. And usually someone will write a standard in RFC, they'll publish the standard, or it may be that there's really no standard, but everybody tends to use one specific type, and that becomes what we often refer to as a de facto standard. That it technically is not a standard, but so many people are using it, it might as well be. That happens sometimes in networking. But in the case of these blocks, a lot of different kind of blocks out there, and they're used in different places around the world. So that's a good example of having to understand or at least recognize some of those different styles, even if it's one perhaps you may not even run into on a normal day-to-day basis. Hopefully that's answered some of your questions about those, but it is something you absolutely need to know for the exam. So make sure you're familiar with it. Let's do some more questions on here. There's a lot of questions along here. This is a pretty good one. We have a callback to kind of our syslog question that we had before. This is from Anonymous. And Anonymous asks or says, what's the reason that syslog 514 is not an encrypted port? Why is it not an encrypted port? Well, first, let's talk about ports, because there's no such thing as an encrypted port. There isn't. A port number is sort of like the address of your house. It's just an address. It's just a destination. It's just a location. And we don't know what's at that location. Is that a house at that location? Is it a store? Is it an empty lot? We have no idea until we get there. Now, fortunately, these port numbers tend to be very standardized. Anytime you see a 514, a UDP 514, you can almost always assume that what's on the other end of that, the service that's being provided that transfers data over that port, is probably syslog. But it doesn't have to be. I could configure a web server to run encrypted web server traffic over port 514 if I wanted to. I could change my SNMP. Instead of using port 161, I could have SNMP use port 514 because it's just a number. It's just something that we've decided that most of the time we will use this well-known port number to be able to describe what service happens to be at the end of that connection. But that doesn't mean that really is what's at the end of the connection. It's only what we expect it to be. And so sometimes you will see occasionally a service using a non-standard port for a number of different reasons. It's not a security reason. It's usually something that's more administrative or something logistically that makes more sense. In fact, they may be running different services on that particular device, and maybe that port number is not currently available. That sometimes happens. So the reason, and this question talked about, why is that not an encrypted port? I think probably the question you want to ask is, why is syslog by itself not encrypting this data being sent over port 514? Which, if you would allow me to sort of stretch that question out, that's really, I think, what's behind this particular question. And that's because when these particular protocols were created, there was relatively little encryption going on a network. In fact, why would you need encryption? The network is in this room. It doesn't leave this room. We've got an enormous mainframe computer here. We've got a terminal on this side, and we have a printer. That's it. That's the only thing connected to this network. Why would we need to encrypt anything? There's no security concern in this room. And many of the protocols we work with back in the day were created in the clear. There was no even concept of integrating some type of encryption within that. Now, if you wanted to encrypt the data, then send it over syslog, and then somehow have a process to decrypt it on the other side, you certainly could do that. But that's outside the scope of syslog. Now, there are updates to these standards like syslog, like DNS, like HTTP, like other protocols, where you have not only an in the clear legacy version of that protocol, but now you have a newer version of the protocol that does have some type of encryption or security built into the method that the protocol uses to transfer that data. A good example of that is HTTP, which is in the clear, and HTTPS, which transfers data over this encrypted connection. It encrypts the data as part of the protocol itself. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to load up anything in your browser. You don't have to install another utility. The browser knows automatically how to encrypt and send that data because the process of doing that is part of the HTTPS standard. And so that's why syslog, ARP, and many other protocols out there never encrypt anything because they were never designed to encrypt anything. And that's certainly a concern from a security perspective. If you tune in tomorrow when we talk Security Plus, or you're someone who's planning to take the Security Plus exam, this is one of those concepts that you will run into in the exam objectives, is that there are secure protocols, but there are also insecure protocols. And you need to know what those differences are and what the alternatives might be. For example, Telnet is certainly an insecure protocol. So what you want to run is secure Telnet. Wait, there is no secure Telnet. That doesn't exist. How about Telnet Secure? No, there's no such thing as Telnet Secure. That doesn't exist. But there is a terminal console based protocol that you could use that works very similar to Telnet, and that would be Secure Shell, or SSH. And that would be the protocol that you would use instead of using the Telnet. That's one of those scenarios where you don't have a secure version of that protocol. You just have to throw it out and use something different. That's one of the other decisions we made in our industry, is sometimes you can find a secure version of that protocol. Sometimes you just have to disable it completely and use something else to be able to do that. And that would be what I would call the reason that 514 does not send data over an encrypted channel by default. It makes sense. Let's do some more questions. We've got others on this list. let's see what other things we might have. Since we were just talking about protocols, let's follow up with a question from Charles, who asks, so is there a way to determine which protocols use TCP and which use UDP? Well, you would probably determine this pretty much the same way that you determine what the port number is for these protocols. You just memorize it. You just tend to learn it over time. You tend to naturally remember, after taking a few packet captures, that HTTP traffic uses TCP over port 80 and HTTPS uses TCP over port 443. And I also might see SNMP traffic, which uses UDP over port 161. So you just get into the mode when you are managing firewalls, capturing traffic, troubleshooting applications, or just simply looking at the traffic going across your network. You tend to find a lot of those port numbers that constantly show up. And you start looking at, is it running TCP or UDP, to be able to understand what it might have under the surface. I think a lot of people still have that belief that there's a difference between these. I mean, functionally, there is certainly a difference between TCP and UDP. Operationally, they work and communicate very differently. But from our perspective as the end user, we never see TCP. We never see UDP. It never comes up on our screen. But yet everything that we're using on our systems tends to work pretty much all the time until today, when AT&T is still down. That's what we have on my phone, is that problem. So that is an important thing to consider, though, is that they both are always working. It's when there is a problem communicating between devices, these two protocols work very differently. And in fact, there was a conversation I was having with someone this week where they said, well, wait, you said that UDP is used for things like DHCP, the DHCP process, the DORA process that you have to learn for Network Plus, has UDP as the protocol that it uses. What if that packet gets corrupted or dropped somewhere along the way? Now, how is it going to be transferred? How does that data, how does it recover from that if there's no TCP? Well, it simply uses something else. It's the responsibility of now the application to be able to understand, hey, I didn't hear anything back. Let me send this out again. So it effectively turns into its own method of maintaining the connection and recovering from dropped packets by having the application be responsible for it rather than the layer 4 protocol being responsible for it. We're simply shifting the responsibility to a different higher level protocol rather than having that responsibility within the layer 4 part of the packet itself. That's what we're dealing with when we try to determine, is it TCP or UDP, and what's the real difference? Functionally, they work the same. The big difference is when they don't work. When there is a problem on the network, they obviously work very, very differently. But ultimately, if the application is written properly and it's using the right protocols, the data will get through. The big difference is who's doing the retransmissions. Is it the layer 4 protocol or is it the application? Sometimes applications don't do any retransmissions. Voice over IP is a good example of that. That's using UDP. And if it drops a packet, it's just dropped. That's it. Can't go back in time in that conversation. We just drop the packets. So you may have it go out, can't hear on that voice over IP connection for a second or two, and then everything's fine again. Well, that's why. Because we can't retransmit the voice. We can't go back in time. That'll be very confusing to the person trying to listen to this conversation. So that's a good example of where a UDP communication, if traffic is dropped, it simply won't send anything out. We just lose it. It's just gone forever. Sort of the way that it's supposed to work. And that's why they use UDP for that, because using TCP is more overhead, takes more time, there's bigger headers, and at the end of a voice over IP conversation, you're never going to need to recover this data anyway because it's too late. By the time you realize that the traffic was dropped, it's too late to recover from that. We have to keep the conversation going. So that's why TCP and UDP exist, because it has different requirements, but it also doesn't limit you in being able to send traffic across the network. Let's keep doing more of this. So we've got more. Well, here's another one along these same lines. Guys have such great questions today. This is a question from Ethan, and this comes up a lot as well. Ethan says, I noticed that DLP, because we talked about data loss prevention today, could mean data link protocols or data loss prevention. Yes, it could. Do you see more of the latter on the exam? Well, there are many different protocols like this where there are an abbreviation, and that abbreviation could mean one or two different things. In the world of networking, for example, a very common one is STP. What is STP? Anyone? Well, you probably answered one of two different things. It's either spanning tree protocol or shielded twisted pair. STP. It's the same. But how do you know which one of those STPs you're using in any particular scenario? How would you figure that out? Well, thankfully, whenever you do find one of these relatively unusual cases where the same abbreviation can be used, the abbreviations or the meaning behind the abbreviation is quite different. There would never be a scenario where you would talk about STP and you were really referring to a switch configuration. Hey, we need to make sure we have STP on that switch. Well, naturally, the context there means we need to make sure we're using spanning tree protocol on that switch because that was the reference. That was the context for that particular statement. You would not be thinking, oh, on this switch, we need to use shielded twisted pair. That is completely out of scope of what we were talking about there because we weren't talking about the cable type we're plugging into the switch. We were talking about the configuration of the switch. But if we were discussing between a couple of folks who were saying, hey, we need to put a 100-meter cable in the ground between two buildings, and all we have is copper. We're going to run a copper line there. What type of copper line should we use? Oh, you should use STP. Oh, you should use spanning tree protocol? That doesn't make sense. No, you should be using a shielded twisted pair. So it's all about context. Same thing here. Data link protocols and data loss prevention, they aren't used together. You'd never see them used together. So it's more along the lines of understanding the context of the question or the context of the scenario. And I think once you do that, you're in fine shape. That's not a big deal at all. You just need to read the question and you should immediately understand, oh, STP in this context means a cable. STP in that context means spanning tree and loop protection on layer 2 networks. So that's a valid question. It's a good question, and it's one that does come up pretty often. Fortunately, it's relatively unusual to find those conflicts where you have a similar or identical abbreviation meaning two different things. Not a real problem there. Other questions. Let's keep going through this. Here's another one. I'll bring this one up. I don't like to bring this up because it's relatively straightforward, but it's a popular question, and you see this all the time. Again, from Ethan, who asks, I've read numerous places online that Cat5 is 100 base T. Has this changed to support 1000 base T? So now all of you that have watched my study groups before, now you know that we're about to get the speech. So let me give you a quick overview of this. First, we need to set the context up properly. We were just talking about context. Let's talk about this context. Whenever you refer to the cable categories, for example, Ethan mentioned here, Cat5 is 100 base T. That's not how cable categories work at all. Cable categories describe the construction and manufacturing and ultimately the ability of a copper cable to be able to transmit energy, transmit electrical signals through it at a particular quality. That's what the category of cable means. We can create a category of cable that is able to send data through with a certain number of physical characteristics. And if it matches that particular level of physical characteristics, we'll call it Cat5. If it matches this different set of electrical characteristics and meets that as a bare minimum, we'll call it Cat 6. If it matches another set. So we're really creating this minimum level of quality of this cable to be able to then run some type of electrical signal over it. But the category of the cable doesn't determine what signal runs over it. It works the other way. The determination of what type of cable you use is written in the IEEE standards. So you've probably seen these IEEE standards in the Network Plus exam objectives. For example, there is a committee of the IEEE called the 802.3 committee. That committee is in charge of the standard for Ethernet. That's a pretty big standard. And they do a lot. There's so many different Ethernet standards they work with. And they write into the standard these types of things. They will say, if you would like to run gigabit Ethernet over twisted pair, the standard that you need to run is 1000 base T. If you look at the Ethernet or the Network Plus exam objectives, you'll see 1000 base T listed there as one of the standards you need to know. And if you were to go to the IEEE website and you were to download the 802.3 standard, which you can do, it is free to download for educational purposes, and you can register there and download your own copy of the standards. And I highly recommend that you do that. There's a lot of electrical engineering in there, but there's also things in there that are very clear and easy to understand. And if you go to the 802.3 standard and you go to the section on 1000 base T, it says you can use category 5 for 1000 base T. The minimum cable standard required for 1000 base T is category 5 cable. That's it. That's in the standard. That's what the standard has always said. That is what the standard originally said. It has never changed. It has always been the minimum supported category of cable for 1000 base T has been always category 5 cable. There you go. That's how we know what the minimum category happens to be. Now, Ethan says, wait, I'm on the internet. I look at websites and I see on certain websites that no, you can use category 5 as a minimum for 100 base TX. But if you wanted to run 1000 base T, you would need category 5E. That's what it says on the website I went to. And of course, when people email these types of things to me all the time, my response to that is, you should contact the person who made that statement and ask them why they feel that why they are saying something that is different than the IEEE published standard. Because the IEEE published standard is what I use to determine what type of minimum cable you should use. It's the standard that everyone else in the world uses to determine what the minimum cable type should be. Why did that website put something different? And that's really the question. What really happened with this is that somebody at some point thought that the standard didn't say what the standard says and published that. And then in this industry, unfortunately, some people don't spend a lot of time doing their math, doing their research, and double checking the things that they write down, because all they had to do was download the standard and look at it to know that they were wrong. But they didn't. And then more people publish this. And so now you have half of the references on the internet are wrong, and half of the references on the internet actually comply with the standard, the published standards. So all I can do as someone who is creating training materials is to be as accurate as possible and to comply with and match what is listed in the IEEE 802.3 published standards. Ultimately, the right answer, the answer that CompTIA will want, the answer that your employer will want, and by the way, the answer that everybody else in the world would want, is the one that matches the IEEE 802.3 standard. Anyone who says anything different is completely incorrect, because it's part of the standard. This is not a subjective comment. It's not a sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I've seen that response. My favorite one to this, the one that I saw was, well, I've worked with Cat5 and I ran into problems with it, so therefore it doesn't run gigabit. Nope, that's not how it works. It works by looking at the electrical determination of that standard, of that category, and then matching it to what the minimum is for that Ethernet standard. So it doesn't matter what your experience was with it. It doesn't matter what somebody else's experience was with it. It's what the engineers who designed Ethernet say is the minimum standard. And by the way, it runs great. Here's the part that I think makes people crazy when I mention this, is if you get a category 5 cable, which indeed is kind of hard to find these days because it's been a while since anyone manufactured category 5. If you put next to it a category 5E cable, it's the same cable. It's literally the same construction, the same wire, the same everything. It's the same cable. Because here's what we did. We created the category 5 standard, and we created tests to make sure that the cables we produced match that category 5 standard. And then the industry said, you know what, we're doing some other things with longer lengths. We're creating some newer standards and higher speeds. We would like to tighten up the standard just a little bit more. So let's create a new series of tests. And if you pass those tests, we'll call it category 5E. Well, what manufacturers of the cable did is they just started testing with E, and they found, oh, guess what? The cable we're already creating as category 5, turns out it also matches category 5E specs. It's the same cable. And so what they did is they changed the stamp on the outside of the cable. Instead of it saying category 5, they changed the stamp, so now it says category 5E. It's the same cable. I tried to explain that to a number of people. I don't tend to explain it's the same cable a lot because there's in people's heads, they don't want to believe it's the same cable, and it tends to start more fights than it solves problems. So I don't tend to say that a lot. But since it's just us talking on the live stream, that's it. And here's the other one. I like that everybody in the chat room was saying, yeah, but here's what I read. Yeah, but here's what I read. This is the good one. This is another good one. So what people will say is that, yeah, you could use Cat5, but it's never going to go at gig speeds. It's going to go like it's 600 megabit. It's only going to go 700 megabit. That's not how it works. It doesn't work that way. It runs at gigabit speeds. It really does. It's like we don't want to believe it. We saw a lie on a website. Why can't we just believe the lie? And we don't want to ever come around and believe what's written in it. Does CompTIA think of it in the same way? Everybody thinks of it in the same way, except the websites that wrote it wrong. The rest of us out here in the industry that have planned networks, built networks, ran cables, purchased cables, we all know the answer, including CompTIA. And that's why you stick to the standards. That's the reason that we have standards to begin with, because they're the ones that make the determination, not some rando website you run across that copied something from another rando website. That's it. So there you go. I'm glad I had the chance to do we'll do this again in 6 months. I'll do my little rant and we'll talk about it and I'll offend people. And I look forward to your cards and letters. I get great emails after those conversations. So it doesn't usually help to get to that point, but it is interesting. It is very interesting to me, and this is more inside baseball, but it's very interesting to me as someone who creates training materials and training content that is heavily scrutinized because it is available for everyone to watch for free on the internet. It's interesting to me how many of these little things are out there that have been these old wives' tales that have sort of grown over time, to the point that you can talk to an industry professional who has been doing networking for 20 years. And if he originally read that the minimum category for 100 megabit is Cat5 and the minimum category for gigabit is 5E, and that's what's been in his head for 20 years, he will not change his mind. Even if you show them the standard, I think it's more human nature than anything, right? But I learned it that way. That must be how it is. But that actually it isn't. It's one of those situations where Fruit in the Loom never had a cornucopia. What are you talking about? Of course it did. No, it never did. So it's the same situation, but with categories of cable. So we can mull that one over. The Berenstein Bears. It was always spelled that way. It was never spelled a different way. Same thing with category 5 cable. So it's just humans. It's just human nature. I saw we had a bit of a glitch. Those of you that are kind of checking in, those of you that are looking at our, we just had that. So thankfully, you missed my whole conversation about the cornucopia and Fruit of the Loom and the Berenstain Bears and how it is spelled. It's the same thing for category 5 cable. That's what we were trying to get to with that one. Hopefully you caught up to that and you were able to hear at least some of that. So thank you so much for giving me the chance to vent a little bit about category 5 and category 5A. It never gets old. The next month we will do how 568A and 568B don't actually create a crossover cable. I'm more than happy to just keep stirring the pot, everybody. That's what we do. Here's another example of this. When we start breaking this down, let's look at this question. So I was just talking about these cables and cable types. So I'm assuming that Lava Rock in this question is comparing this to category 5. So I'm going to change the question. And it says, does category 5E have better shielding than category 5? It's the same cable. It's literally the same cable. It is not only not have better shielding, it is literally the same cable. Same shielding, same number of wires, same type of wires, same type of twist rates on the different pairs, same type of connections, same you know why it's the same? That's right, same cable. That's it. So this by the way, this continues. This never ends. So we're just going to keep going. Eventually, my dream would be that in the future someday, we would be able to wipe those problems from the internet. And I'm starting to see some momentum along those lines. People have started thinking, oh, wait, you're right. I read the standard. I saw the cut and paste that Professor Messer did from the standard that clearly states that 1000 base T uses category 5 as a minimum category of cable. Now they're learning that the proper category when they learn it. Now people are going back to these sites and going, do you know that's wrong? The thing you put there, we thought it was right. We've been saying it forever this way. Turns out it's wrong. And in some cases, they're correcting it. By the way, Wikipedia has never had it wrong. It's always been right. So when people usually say this, I go, well, go over to Wikipedia, have a look at that, and then come back to me. And that way I don't have to get involved in the conversation. And they go, oh yeah, I read it there. Turns out they got it right. Like, thank you. No more of that. I don't have to spend any more time on it. Turns out that's wrong too. I did have to spend more time on it. More things. There was a question. I didn't do a secret code for this particular study group, but I guess we could. If you're someone who is watching still, we could certainly add a continuing education unit credit for this one. I think that would be very good. I think that would be useful to have. So if you are watching this for continuing education unit credit, I would love to give you, because you've been watching into the second hour, I will give you 2 hours. How am I going to do this? I don't know if I can. We'll do 1 hour. And if you really, really want another hour, we can try this. Well, I'll give you an hour of a webinar category CEU. And here's how you can earn this. You need to get an email from me to be able to submit this to CompTIA. And the way you would do this is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You click on the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address. In the subject line, put February 2024 Network Plus. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, category 5. Category 5 is your super secret code word of the month. It's just going to trigger me all month. That's how it's going to work. Every time one comes in, it's be, oh, category 5. That's how it's going to go. So that's how you do it. Now you can put other things into that message as well. I read through everything you send. I get a lot of these. I get hundreds of these. So I'm not able to reply back to all of them, but I will send you in about a week, probably less this week. I need to get them out of my queue. I will send you an email that certifies that you were here for a 1 hour webinar category CEU. So again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us. In that put in that form that comes up, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put February 2024 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on the line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month. I guess it is words. Category 5. The 5 can be the number 5. It can be written out F-I-V-E. I don't care. Either way works for me. That's fine. So we'll do 1 hour of a webinar category CEU on this one. And I'd love to give you 2, but the system that I put together doesn't currently support that. So I need to do some more coding. I need to do a different script. And then I'll work on that. Someone asked about that last month. So I need to work through those to be able to do it and be able to have the different options there. Let's take another question. We could do 2 codes to do 2 hours worth. That's true because I have 1 code for 1 hour. We'll do 2 codes. You'd have to listen in. Maybe we'll do another one here in a few minutes. Keep people listening a little bit longer on this one. Here's the question from Jenry, who asks, a packet exceeding MTU 1500 bytes, is that called a giant or is it called a jumbo? Again, it's all about context, isn't it? That's exactly the situation here. If you have a packet that you have configured to allow it to have a larger MTU than 1500, then you are using jumbo frames. So, for example, I have a storage area network here, and really it's more of a SAN, a NAS than a SAN. So I have a NAS system set up, and the NAS that I have configured my system to communicate to the NAS with a maximum MTU size of 9,000 bytes. So instead of having 1,500 byte frames, I can have 9,000 byte frames. That way I can transfer much more across the network in a single frame instead of having multiple frames go through. It improves the efficiency. It reduces the amount of overhead with the protocols. It's a much faster way to transfer data, which is certainly important if you're someone who is working on getting all of these together and being able to use them. This is an important consideration. It makes my backups to my NAS go so much faster. But what if you had configured the system for 1,500 bytes, except for some reason, larger frames were going across your network? In that case, the frames would be giants because we set a minimum of 1,500, but we're seeing frames larger than the minimum. Or maximum, rather. I said minimum. I really do mean a maximum transfer unit, MTU. I set the maximum to be 1,500. For some reason, we're seeing larger than the max. That shouldn't happen. That's an error. That's a giant. So it's about what you set the MTU for on your network, and is it exceeding what you set it for is the difference. MTUs that exceed 1,500, you have to set. You have to configure in your switch. You have to configure on your workstation. You have to configure on your other equipment. Everything has to understand that you're sending 9,000 byte frames or larger or smaller even across the network. Whatever those are, you're setting up the jumbo frames that way. But if it's not configured that way and you're getting larger frames, then those are giants. So you don't want to run into errors on your network. Giants are certainly a big problem if you are not expecting them. But if you are expecting them, they're not giants anymore. It's part of what you already turned on with your jumbo frames, making those work. The CEUs we mentioned earlier are continuing education unit credits. That's what the CEU is. They are used for renewing a certification. If you have not earned a certification yet, they don't do you any good. But if you are using them as a renewal, then you can use them. A lot of people don't use CEUs anymore. They use CERTmaster CE. They take a higher level certification. There are other ways to renew your cert. You don't have to use CEUs for that. You just need to redeem them during your 3-year renewal period. So there's a whole description on how to use CEUs on the CompTIA website. Look for the continuing education section, the renewal section of the website, and they go into a lot of detail. Tons of detail about all of those. And I have a video, it's in the YouTube video description of this video, that talks about how to renew your certification in just a few hours. And it really talks about using CERTmaster CE instead of using CEUs. So it's really up to how you like to renew your certs ultimately. So that's what I would recommend you have a look at the different options. One way to renew may be better than another, depending on what you're doing and how you're planning to renew your cert. So an important consideration. Let's get some more questions in. Other questions that are there. Darian says, I'm taking my Network Plus exam tomorrow. Wish me luck. Now you've got the luck of all of us going out for your Network Plus exam tomorrow. Best of luck. Let us know how it goes. That would be good to know. Always like to hear how this turned out and working through them. Other questions. This is more of this one is not in here. It's another one from the chat room that says, can you explain the difference between a threat vector and an attack vector? We use the terminology. We swap them out. It's the same thing. A threat vector and an attack vector, it's the same thing. I mentioned that in my Security Plus course, that we just use those terms interchangeably. They are not, I know some people like to differentiate between the two. We don't. It's the same thing. A threat vector and an attack vector is the same thing in the context. Now, technically, I guess you could fight over the context and the semantics of using threat versus attack. Don't bother, because we use them the same way. Whether they are indeed different doesn't matter. We use them as the same terms. And indeed, I think they're pretty close enough that you can use them as the same terms. So I think we're fine there. We'll keep going through our list of these and trying to figure out the details of it. Other options in here. Let me archive off some of these so we can make more room for more questions that are coming in. If you'd like to submit a question, I should probably put the link up here. There's the link on your screen. We are submitting questions as part of the Vevox front end. You can find that front end by following the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to follow that link and submit any questions that you might have. Let's get into, now we're getting top of the hour. We're getting close to the top of the hour. So we're getting into some of the more detailed questions about me and my life, which we are not going to discuss a lot of, but these are kind of old school questions that we're going to go through super quick. This is someone, we talked a little bit about this today. If you're someone who's followed our training materials over time, you know that we have A+ practice exams, it's Security Plus practice exams, but I've never written a book yet or published a book yet. I should be more specific, for a Network Plus practice exam. There are plans to publish a Network Plus practice exams book this year. A lot of people are wondering, why haven't you just published it? Well, because you have to write it. And that's really the hardest part of this, is the writing part. But we are planning to write it and have it available to you in this calendar year. Will that happen? I hope so. Could it not happen? It could not. It might not. We don't know. Until it is available, it's not. That's sort of my perspective of this. Until the moment it's in your hands, it doesn't exist, or it might as well not exist. Because if it's not in your hands, what good is it? I could be writing it for months. Doesn't help you. So currently, we don't have one. We would love to provide one to you this calendar year. There are no dates. There's no specifics yet, but it's on my list. And I think it'd be an important thing to do. And it'd be kind of fun to do too. Network Plus is stuff I really enjoy. So we'll do that. DD says, hey, remember back to the bird feed camera? Do we still have the bird feed camera? We don't. No more bird feed camera. One of the challenges you get when you set up a camera with birds, first, it's great to have a camera if you like watching birds, and there's some great ones that are out there. Rutgers has a fantastic bird feed camera. But one of the things that comes with that is bird feed. And if you put bird seeds outside, what you find is there is a lot of animals that like to eat the bird seed that aren't birds. So you end up attracting a lot more birds, but you also end up attracting other animals instead of the birds. And very often those other animals may not necessarily be animals you want around. Sometimes it was very innocuous. A lot of raccoons would show up at night. Yeah, they don't hurt anything. They just eat the food, and then you got to refill the food. But sometimes they can be a lot more varminty. They can be, mice things you really don't want around. Because it's out in the woods, it's out in the outside, and they go around. But I think that's a really good example of why I no longer have the bird feeder outside. Interestingly enough, BirdBuddy has created some great bird feeders that have a camera built in now. They got a solar power you can put on them. So really practically anyone can set one of these things up now to be able to do it. So now you could do your own bird feeder. It's kind of nice to have that option there. A lot of good stuff there. So if you're someone who is trying to work through the bird feeder, yep, don't have it anymore. Doesn't exist, but that's okay. You could do your own now. And there's plenty of bird feeders out on the internet that you could pull from. So that's kind of where that I kind of focus on that. One of the things on the Network Plus exam is that you have to know subnetting. Subnetting can be a little bit of a challenge to learn from the very beginning. There's a lot of addition and subtraction, and anytime you deal with math at all, it tends to be a challenge. I tend to tell people subnetting is really more about just cutting a pizza into even slices. You get a pizza, how many of us are there? There's 8. Okay, let's cut 8 slices, and everybody gets the same size slice. And then we can hand out slices out. That's what subnetting is. What if there aren't 8 people, there's 16 people? Oh, cut the slices a little thinner. You know, everybody still gets a slice of the pizza, but you don't get as big of a slice. There aren't quite as many hosts that you can fit under that subnet of your slice of pizza. So the question from Ethan, again, who asks, great questions, what method do I like to use? Do I use the 7-second subnetting method or the magic number method? Now, these are shortcuts to subnetting. And they're shortcuts because to do subnetting, you would have to convert a decimal into binary, perform a binary math, and then convert the binary back to decimal to know what the results of that math were. That's a little involved when you're in the middle of a certification exam. So what a lot of people have done, including myself, is they've come up with shortcuts that allow you to effectively perform that math without having to do it. And in fact, that's what I did. I wrote my own way of doing it that requires effectively no math. I wanted to come up with a no math version of subnetting. So a lot of people will tell you, why don't you just learn the powers of 2? Why don't you just memorize what the different delineations are on a network that has 8 hosts per subnet? Just memorize where those 8 different subnets fall, and you don't have to do all the math. Well, I'm not going to remember that. And during an exam, I'm really not going to remember that. I can barely remember my name during these exams, much less powers of 2 and did I get it right? And then I got the math wrong and I got the question wrong. It didn't work for me. So I wanted to create a shortcut that had no multiplication, no powers of 2, no division. The worst thing you would have to do is add 1 or subtract 1. I can do that. I can add and subtract 1, but it requires you to write down a little bit of a cheat chart. Not really cheating, it's just more of a chart before you really start things. So a lot of people even tell me, there's a lot of chart writing in that 7-second subnetting. There is. You do all the work up front, which is really only about 30 seconds of work. You can write these charts out very, very quickly. It's 30 seconds of chart, maybe a minute of chart writing, maybe. And then once you have the chart written, you really can subnet a network in 7 seconds, really less than 7. I used my 7-second subnetting format, my quick reference guide there. I did that process, that shortcut I used for all of my professional certification training courses and things that I would take. So when I took Cisco certification tests, I used 7-second subnetting. When I did Palo Alto Networks tests, I used 7-second subnetting because I didn't want to have to worry about the math. Taking exams for me is high pressure. It's all on me. It's a lot of anxiety. I don't deal with it very well during an exam. I cannot, everything just, there's a ringing in my ear. I don't understand what I'm reading on the screen. And then you want me to do math? Nope, not going to do it. So that's why I created the 7-second program. A lot of people, though, say they don't like it. They can do powers of 2. They're not messed up in the head like you are, Professor Messer. I can go to take an exam. I don't have that anxiety. I don't need a no math method. I just need something that's a little fast for me to do, and I don't want to have to write out anything. Not a problem. Magic number method works perfectly for that. Magic number method is also the one that probably a lot of the people learning Cisco, they use that method because that's the shortcut method that is documented in the Cisco training guides and the Cisco books that are published from Cisco Press. So I think both of them are good. And I have used both of them in different scenarios. I tend to use 7-second more because I just hate doing math during an exam. I tend to use other methods when I'm not in an exam. For example, if I was planning out a network, I would just use an online subnet calculator to double check my work. That's something common. But it also helps, though, if you're someone who is planning out or you're implementing a device onto a /26 network, it's useful if you know what to expect from the different subnets on a /26. And if you can look at an IP address that's been given to you and a default gateway that's been given to you, and you can look at them instantly and say, wait a second, wait, before you go anywhere, the IP address you gave me is on a different subnet than the default gateway you gave me. That's not going to work. They go, oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. That's because I could remember /26 in my head. That does become really, really useful when you do that. That actually happened to me in the real world. Whenever I got my very first cable modem, they were rolling out cable modems in where I lived, and cable modem technology in general was relatively new, to the point that you were given a static IP address that you had to configure in the cable modem, which I thought was interesting. And nothing was dynamic. Now, all of that, of course, these days has changed. It's all dynamic. You plug it in and it works. But they sent me an email that said, here's the IP address you should put in, and here's the subnet mask. This one was even easier because the subnet mask was 255.255.255.0. It was obvious that the IP address they gave me and the subnet and the default gateway they gave me were on different subnets. It was obvious. And I sent them a note back saying, well, that's not going to work. It's not even going to take it because they're on different subnets. This is not working. It's not going to work. They go, well, we're going to have to roll somebody to your place. They couldn't figure out to do it on the phone. They didn't have a script for that. They didn't have an automated response to someone who says to them, these are on different subnets. Who's going to say that? Well, I am, of course. So that's one of those situations where they really were able to, they actually did roll somebody. They arranged for someone to come to my studio, and they go, where's the problem? I go, well, there's not really a problem. It's just the IP address here is this, and here's the default gateway that they gave me. And he said, well, that's not going to work. Like, I know. That's why you're here. All right, let me call somebody. Called somebody, got a different set of IP addresses, and everything worked fine from that point on. So it was pretty good. That was kind of humorous. Eventually, you just got to get the right person in front of you. Now, I always ask for the guy. Just where is the guy who knows how to make this work, or the person who knows how to make this work? Not the person, not the guy, not the gal, the guy, the gal. That's who I want. I want the person who knows how to make this work. And then we can kind of skip over a lot of the other stuff. Did you reboot the router we could reboot it all day, but it's the subnet it's on a different, they didn't know what to do. It was one of those. And so that was kind of fun to finally get somebody who goes, oh yeah, that's not going to work. He knew immediately. And that's always a good feeling when you're trying to do troubleshooting, to find somebody who tells you, oh yeah, you got it right. I see what you're saying now, to be able to use that. Some folks are asking, well, where do I find this 7-second subnetting? Where do I find this magic number method? Well, you simply go to the Professor Messer website and you look at the Network Plus. Well, why don't I do it? I'm right here. We go to the Professor Messer website. On the Professor Messer website, we go to the Network Plus menu. We go to the free Network Plus videos. We look at the ad that comes up. We go to the free Network Plus videos. So here's all our Network Plus videos all listed out and everything that's there. And in there are 2 videos, one on the magic number subnetting and one on the 7-second subnetting. There they are. And you can learn one or the other or both if you would like. It's completely up to you. That's on professormesser.com. It's all part of the course. That makes it easy if you're looking for those. I know we're at the top of the hour. I want to get another question in before we are done today. Here's a challenging one. And I'll mention this when this does come up from time to time. This is from Sergio. It says, my CompTIA Security Plus cert expired. Whenever you become, you earn your certification is good for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, it will expire unless you renew it. So Sergio says, my CompTIA Security Plus cert expired and I missed the renewal deadline. Is there something I can do to renew it? Or is there something else I can do to renew? It's a good question. Once your certification expires, it's gone. It's no longer exists. It's no longer available to you. You would have to take the exams again as if you were taking them for the first time to become certified again. That said, there have been instances, these are rare and few and far between, which is the same thing as rare, but it's both of those. There have been instances where people it's the day it expires or the day after, they call CompTIA and they beg and they plead, please, I will buy CERTmaster CE. I will take that. I'll get it done in a day and we'll get it renewed. Please, please, can I do that? And in some cases, not all of them, they have granted them some additional time to get their certification renewed. This does not always happen. It is not a guarantee. It may never happen again, as far as I know. I'm not in charge of it. I'm not the one who decides anything about your certifications. I have no insight into that process, and I am not involved in it in any way. So that's just one of those that it's all up to CompTIA how they would like to handle that particular situation. And it seems that the policies they use for this have tended to change through the years. So I don't know what the policy currently is for that. Sergio, I would recommend that if this is something that is relatively recent for your expiration date, I would call CompTIA and throw yourself at the judge, throw yourself at the support team and say, please, oh, please, is there anything I can do? I will wash your car. I will take out the garbage. I will paint the front of your house. Just tell me, what can I do? And then they'll let you know that, well, we'll give you more time or you're going to have to take the exam again. That may be what the different options are. They're the ones that make that decision, though, and they're the only ones who can make that decision. I would also recommend you contact them. And if they say, sorry, there's no renewal available for you, then you just have to take Security Plus again. Now, the good part of that is it's only a single exam. At least you don't have to take the A+ exams again. That's 2 separate exams. So I always like to find the silver lining. There it is. It's only a single exam, and you may already know most of the content because you are Security Plus certified, or at least you were. Not to drive that home, but you're not certified anymore. So maybe they can help you, though. Sometimes they can. I guess it depends on their particular schedule and what they're doing, but that at least will give you an idea of what options you would have, if any. I'm not able to make that decision. Hopefully they can help you make that decision as well. And Sergio even says, I mean, is there something can I renew it or do I have to take the exam? I don't know. You know, if you stick to the rules, if you stick to the definition of the exam expiration, after that expiration date, you are no longer certified. You must take the exams again to become certified again. But maybe they can bend a few of the rules for you. Maybe they can make it a little bit easier for you. You'd have to contact them to figure that out. So that's what I think you should worry about. Maybe they can help you, But you should probably just set yourself up for disappointment, because that's how I go through life, right? Just set yourself up for disappointment, and being able to make that happen. But maybe they can give you some options. But ultimately, worst case, you just take the exam again. That's not a horrible case, by the way. That's not a bad thing to have to do. So you can make that happen. It might be a little more expensive, but you could probably make that happen. Let's do one more question. Let's see if I can get more of these in. Let's find a good one to kind of finish up. I see this a lot, so we're going to talk about this from B. Hey, B. What's up, B? B says, what's the best entry-level job to get my foot in the door? All the help desk positions are asking for 1 to 3 years of experience for entry-level positions. I see this too all the time. That's why I chose this B. What's up, B? The thing that I see most often with these job postings for help desk is a complete overqualification for the people that they're hiring. Now, there may be employers that do have a higher level help desk. Maybe they're hiring for a tier 2, a tier 3, a higher level, someone who's not just answering phones and doing triage. Maybe you do want someone who's a little more, has a little more experience doing that, because they're working at a higher level with that help desk. And in fact, things like, I think about AT&T, which, by the way, is back up and running. How's that for timely? We now have an AT&T signal on my phone. The folks at AT&T, there are level 1 techs, level 2, level 3. There's probably level 4 and level 5. So they have a huge tier of technical people where problems can filter through and get resolved. So these jobs may not be entry-level jobs. It may actually be more than entry-level jobs. But when you're looking at it, you see help desk and you think, that seems entry-level, right? Help desk? Well, there's some help desks that are pretty extensive, that are big. There's lots of levels and lots of different qualifications for those different tiers. So not everything is an entry level. However, there are also cases where employers are just not really reading through or spending a lot of time to properly describe the requirements for a particular role. And sometimes this happens because lines get crossed within an organization. Sometimes hiring managers aren't the ones writing the job descriptions. Sometimes the folks who are writing the job descriptions have no idea what the requirements are for the job. And you end up with jobs like this, where they're asking for a minimum of 5 years of knowledge of particle physics. You have to be able to birth a baby with a grapefruit spoon and some twine, and you need 1 to 3 years of experience. It's just a ridiculous series of requirements to be able to earn that particular position. But here's what I would recommend. If you look through the job description and you see that it really is an entry-level position, you see that they really are looking for someone at tier 1, and you feel that that particular job posting matches your requirements, submit your resume. Why are you deciding whether you get the job or not? Or I should say, why are you deciding that you're completely dismissed from getting the job? You should not be the one denying that particular application. Let them deny the application, because what they might get in their list of apps that people are sending in is 20 people, none of which would have 1 to 3 years experience. And they may think to themselves, well, I know we asked for 1 to 3 years, but we got 20 here of people. Well, let's just go through these 20. Maybe we can find somebody good in this list. That happens all the time. Unfortunately, that happens all the time. So don't let yourself be the arbiter. Let somebody else make the decision on whether you should be rejected or not. That is the real key here, is put the resume out there. Write a killer cover letter. If you're trying to determine what a killer cover letter might look like, I have videos on 5 reasons your resume keeps getting rejected, and 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. They're in the YouTube video description of this video. I think it's the second one where I talk about cover letters. The cover letter style I like best, speaking as someone who was a hiring manager, is a T style, like timeout, like T. Spend your time putting together a cover letter that's better than anyone else's, that really describes your strengths, compares them to the requirements for the job position, have a well-written resume, and submit it. If they say no, it's a normal day. You've just gotten used to the rejection, like we all have. We are just rejected. That's fine. I'm off to the next one. And we just keep doing that. And we just keep going. And we just keep sending the resumes, writing the killer cover letters, making sure our resume is updated, in some cases customized for the job that we're submitting this for. I also talk about customizing your resume in those video series, 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. That is perhaps one of those that you never know what pile of resumes they're getting. Now, they may end up getting 20 resumes where everybody has 1 to 3 years of experience. Okay, well, we're out of the running on that one. But you'll never know. It's not like they're going to tell you. And you may be one of the people at the top of the list of what they do get. So that's what you should focus on, is understanding what you know that job to be, what you really feel your qualifications are for that particular job. And if those two match, send your resume in. It doesn't matter what they're asking for. It doesn't matter that they want 4 years of this and 2 years of that, and knowledge of, doesn't matter. Ultimately, they're trying to fill a role with someone who makes sense for the problems that they're trying to solve. It may be that they just need a warm body, and they're just trying to find somebody who's not going to flake out on them. So they say 1 to 3 years of experience, but really they're just looking for somebody who's not going to quit after a month. I'll also say, and this really is more of, speaks to my video I did on how to get a job in IT with no experience, which is also in the YouTube video description of this video. That video, I talk about knowing someone who works there. And I want to say that as a former hiring manager, one of our biggest challenges, I don't want to say fears, but it's almost there. One of our biggest challenges is hiring somebody and then they leave in a month. Like, oh, when you hire somebody who is overqualified for a job, they leave in a month. When you hire somebody who's underqualified for a job, they leave in a month. You're looking for this very narrow, sweet spot for the perfect candidate to fit into. And there is no perfect candidate. So you have to kind of change your criteria a bit with every person. Well, they're strong at this, but maybe a little weak at this. Oh, they're weak at that, but a little stronger at this. You have to figure out the formula yourself. But one of the ways that I think is important is if you know somebody who works there, suddenly that flake out worry goes away for the hiring manager. Oh, you know Christine in accounting? Oh, you've known her for 10 years? Oh, your kids go to school together? That's great. I'm so glad to hear that. It really increases your ability to get a job. We often say it's not what you know, it's who you know. The reality is it's what you know and it's who you know. And you have to put all of those things together to be able to have the best possible chance of earning that job. So they're asking for 1 to 3 years of experience, and you don't have 1 to 3 years of experience. Who cares? Put your resume in. If you really feel that you qualify, that you would be a good candidate for that position, put your resume in. Let them be the ones to reject you later. That's not your worry. You know that it fits. If they don't get it, fine. You'll find somebody that does. You didn't need to work for them anyway. If they don't get you, you don't need to be around them. Boo. That is the key for anybody who's looking for a job, is rejection comes with it. Be ready for the rejection. Feel free. Just give me your best shot. Give me your best rejection email. No problem. I'm going to go just keep putting the resume out there and keep talking to people and keep going to user groups and keep finding people and asking people I know if they know anyone who's hiring. I'm just going to keep doing it until I get that job. And that's really your best way to go about doing that. This is along those same lines. This is sort of an adjunct to that. Jamal mentions this, and it is interesting. Should a high number of applicants scare us away on LinkedIn? It turns out, and I know this will be hard for you to believe, but the numbers on LinkedIn that show the number of applicants may not actually represent the number of applicants. What? I know. It's true. So there have been a number of people, hiring managers, that talk about these numbers that they're seeing on LinkedIn. And they say, on LinkedIn, it said that 1,000 people submitted applications for this job. I got 10. I got 7. Like, the numbers on LinkedIn did not match the numbers they were getting, which leads me to believe that perhaps in some way, that number of applicants that are listed on LinkedIn may actually be referring to a different set of metrics. I can't say that that's the case. I can't deny it. I can't confirm it. I don't know, but it seems allegedly that there could possibly be a bit of discrepancy between the applicant's number and the number of applications. Hard to believe that may be the case, but it does seem like perhaps that actually might be the case. Well, I guess there's reasons to run kind of fast and loose with some of these numbers from a business perspective. But again, who cares? Who cares how many applicants have been submitted for a particular job? Put your resume in. You know, one of the things that that statistics are really good for is explaining to us how ridiculous statistics are. I take, for example, we talk about someone winning the lottery. The chances of you winning the lottery are ridiculous. It would be a much bigger chance for you to be hit by lightning. We've all heard these stories. It is impossible. It is statistically impossible for you to win the lottery. And yet, people win the lottery. So it's one of those cases where unless once you win it, if you were to win the lottery, there was a 100% chance you were winning the lottery, as it turns out. So statistics are a ridiculous thing to have to fight and figure out, especially online, where things are a little bit fast and loose when it comes to definitions and metrics. But I think but like the lottery, if you don't play, you're not going to win. So you got to play if you're planning to win. You got to submit the resume if you're ever expecting to get that job. And you never know how these things go. This has happened to me a lot, is that I'll put out, as a hiring manager, I'll put out an open rec. Here's an open position, and I'm looking for somebody to fill it. I get some resumes in. I start going through the resumes. I find a good one. This one's good. He's got all the stuff. She's doing all the things. They're working. This is a great resume. Let's call them. We call them. We have a great conversation. We bring them in for a meeting. We have a great interview. We start putting together the final numbers to perhaps send them an offer letter. And they send me an email and says, something else came up and I took this other job. I'm off the market. My parents have called. I'm moving back to Mississippi. So I'm off the market. Like, oh, I just had this. I was right there. I was just about to offer the job. Now I got this other stack. Let's go back to the stack. So everybody who got rejected the first time, now you're back in the game. This happens all the time. So even if you submit your resume, even if you feel you're watching online, the job posting goes away, maybe somebody gets hired, you notice somebody else pops up on LinkedIn, maybe they filled the position, they might be gone in a month. They might decide, we really need more people. They might get a new project suddenly showing up, but now they have your resume. And when they always tell you in the rejection letters, we will keep your resume on file should any opportunities occur in the future. They really do. They really keep your resume on file. Resumes are valuable to hiring managers. We hoard them. We keep them close. My precious. We make sure we have the resumes because at any moment, our director may walk in and say, you know that project we were talking about where we've got to do this thing in 6 months and we got to roll out this new site and we got to build this thing. We need 20 people. All right, I got my resumes. Let's go through them, start making calls. This happens a lot. It doesn't happen a lot these days, but when things start to turn around in the economy, you're going to see more and more of these projects crop up. There are projects going on right now, though. They're fewer and they're farther between, but they do exist still. I like it when the economy's doing better and there's more projects, but we have to be ready for that. Get your resume out there. Get it in the hands of people. Find people you know, give them your resume. Have them give your resume to people they know at work. Have them give it to the IT team. Have them submit it to HR so they get a employee referral bonus. Whatever you have to do to get your resume spread around town, keep doing it. That's the real key. And you may find something quick. It might take months, but eventually, when you have this strategy of putting your resumes out, talking to people you know, going to user group meetings, making sure your LinkedIn is up to date, putting together a home lab, there's all these things you can do to set yourself up for success. And if you are not doing these things, how do you plan to succeed? It's a battle. It's a competition. You are fighting everyone else. And unless you present yourself as better than everyone else, you're not going to be. So make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row, that this is war. This is important. This is your future. This is your career future. This is your financial future. This is your family's future. These are all the things. This is why we do what we do. We enjoy doing this, but it's also a job. And we need this to continue with this plan that we have. Put together your strategy. Blasting out 1,000 resumes and hoping for something to hit is not a high quality series of tasks. There are much higher quality tasks you can do to make this go even better. So make sure you think about every aspect of the hiring process and how you can put yourself at the top of every single one of those lists. It becomes really important. Okay, well, we have now gone more than half an hour late over what we were planning to do, but I think it was a good set of conversations. It is always good to hang out and kind of discuss some of these ideas and what we do with technology and how we can focus on it in the big world of hiring and IT and everything else that goes into it. Hopefully you were able to get something out of that in this after show today as well. As I mentioned, this is the week for live stream. So if you liked this live stream, first, it'd be great if you gave it a thumbs up. It would be even better if you subscribed. I would love you forever. It would be really awesome. We could be friends. We could pal around. It would be great if you just subscribed. The other thing they'll let you know is that we have another one of these live streams tomorrow. Assuming my voice holds out, we will have a Security Plus live stream tomorrow where I have all brand new questions from the brand new 701 Security Plus exam objectives. And maybe there'll be something there you can learn about security and be ready for that as well. We would love it if you joined us tomorrow for that. You can find out times in your local area in either professormesser.com/calendar or the events channel of our Discord, which is where I will be after we're here. That is at 12 noon Eastern time. If you're in Discord, it shows you the time in your local time zone. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. We always have so much fun doing these live streams. We thank you so much for joining us. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow or the next time on our next Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you then.